Good morning, Breakfast with Bacon fans. I have a powerful show for you today. It's actually quite somber, but it always has a positive ending. That's why I live all my life sunny side up. Is I want to tell you the tough truths about society, but I also want to do something about it. And my guest today is one of those guests who has a somber story, who has done something about it, and we're both wanting to just, take you to the joy of life and give you some actionable things to do. So let me start with saying, welcome, Myra Neyer. Myra, who you see her beautiful face there, no, she's not 29, even though she looks like it. She is a widow and a mother of seven. She is a former Planned Parenthood employee who is now a pro-life activist, and she's got quite the harrowing story that kind of shook her up and helped her to find truth. So I don't want to do too much more talking. Myra, welcome so much to Breakfast with Bacon. I appreciate you more than you can imagine.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I kind of introduced a little bit of your story. So, can you, when you and I had first talked, you kind of shared with me what led up to your starting at Planned Parenthood. Would you mind kind of taking us back? Who are you? How'd you get seven babies? Well, we know how you got seven babies, but you got seven beautiful babies. And let's go there.
Overgrown babies now.
Yes, that's why I said you're not 29, even though you look it.
No. Um, but thank God for that. God is good. Um, so I actually became a widow. And when I became a widow, I was actually a widow of five children. My husband, John, had passed away in a car accident. So I became a single mom. And then, from that point on, I was pretty much just in this dark place. I did go to church every Sunday. I had my children baptized. Um, I did everything, you would do to be a good person, right? All the
Yeah.
things they tell you to be a good person. And I did. I did all the things I was supposed to do. But it didn't stop from, tragedy from happening to my family. My husband died in a car accident unexpectedly. Um, and here I am thrown into single motherhood with five babies.
And you were how old at
Um,
that time?
32.
Yeah, that's young.
So that happened. And my youngest, actually, at the time, my two youngest were 2 and 5. My oldest was 11 when John passed away. So, I went through a dark point in my life where I met someone else.
Myra, we lost your audio. Can you hear me? We lost your audio. Can you hear me? I can't hear you. We lost your audio. You're muted. Can you turn your mic on? There you
Are
go.
you able to hear me now?
I can. I don't know what happened, but we lost your
I
mics.
can't hear you.
You can't hear me now?
Now I could hear you.
Oh, see, we prayed before we went on the air that Satan would not get a hold of our technology, so he's
He's going
trying.
to try it.
Your story's powerful. So can you go back? You said you had the accident. Your children were 11 was the oldest, 2 was the youngest. You did everything you
Exactly.
should do, and then what happened?
So I pretty much went through a dark time in my life. I call it the next 4 years were more of a blank and a blur. Just because I gave up on God. I decided I was very angry with him. I did everything I was supposed to do as a Christian, and he still took John away from me. So I had a lot of anger. Um, I don't think I ever felt the hurt from losing John because I was just so angry at God. For years, I was just so angry that I never allowed myself to mourn John. So I went through life like that. And then I met someone else almost a year later. Um, Quickly got into a relationship with that person, didn't see the red flags because, again, I was being defiant, right? When we're being defiant, we do everything we're not supposed to do.
Right.
I also was hanging out at clubs, drinking more, stuff like that. So I ended up in a new relationship, and that's where my last two babies came from. Um, so real shortly from Baltimore, I moved to California with this guy. The red flag that I didn't see then that I can tell you about now was that he moved me away from my family.
Yeah.
I had no one there, knew no one. It was a brand new place with my now 6 babies because I had just had a baby. So that's a red flag, right? You
Mm-hmm.
see the little things, but you don't pay attention, and then they move you away and isolate you.
Or you find excuses for them. Well, this is only because of this.
It's only exactly, and you say, I can change them. You know, we can do this. When I got to California, I found out my son, my youngest, was 3 months at the time, our son. I found that I was pregnant with my daughter, and my
So
son
number
was only 3
7.
months old. Number 7. So here goes the abortion thing. So I didn't know how I was going to do it with another baby. And everyone was in my head with this. You can't do this. He's 3 months old. You have other babies. You know, everybody knew he was no good except for me. And I did think about it for a moment, but the Catholic in me, the part of my grandmother that was still instilled in me from growing up, would not allow me to think that. So I had my daughter. And not only that, but my mom actually had called me. She knew I was pregnant before I did. My father had passed away also when John passed away. So I lost John. I lost my kid's grandmother 6 months later. A month after her, I lost their grandfather, my father-in-law. And then a month after him, I lost my dad. So I have to make this, you know, I have to let you guys know that my whole support system died with John and my family members that passed away. They were my only support system. They're the ones I could pick up the phone if I needed anything, if I needed a pep talk, anything I needed, that was my system. And they were all gone. So again,
Devastating.
I couldn't mourn John because I was too busy losing everybody else at the same time, just months apart, that it just
And
made
trying
me
to feed your
angry.
family.
And trying to be a mom and trying to not show my kids that inside I was dying, but in the outside, they never saw it. So they never saw what was really going on in my to understand. And, you know, they only had me now. So yeah, it was a lot of anger towards God. It seemed like one after the other, I was just getting smacked around. And I was just like, I never steal from nobody. I don't do drugs. I don't abuse my children. Why are you taking my people from me? You know? So I got to a broken part. That's where I was breaking. So I stayed in California for 18 months. And there I started seeing the red flags. So no matter how much I ran from God,
He won't
I
run
went to
from you.
California and I became homeless. I was homeless with 6 kids and a baby in my belly. And this guy ended up in prison. As soon as I got there, he got arrested in prison. So that was like God's way of taking it away out of my life, like just getting rid of it for the moment
Thank
to
God.
work on me. So I didn't see that back then, but I do now. And once that happened with him, you know, I never gave up. I got up every day from the shelter that we were staying at. I looked for a job. I was there for a month. Within that month, I found a job. I found a house. Ironically enough, I was running from God, but the place that helped me was called the Jesus Center.
Hmm.
So
He
that's
always
what I'm
finds
telling
you.
you, like, like the Jesus Center. And I'm like, really? Like a bunch of religious folks, right? Going to tell me about God. And I don't want to hear it, you know?
Just give me
But
the
I
job.
started,
Yeah.
but I started talking to them and telling them my story. And they just like took this love to me and my family that when I got the place, I had no furniture. Mind you, I was homeless. Only thing we had was clothes, right? So this is how God works. So the lady there kept inviting me to the church and I kept saying no. Like I don't want to go there. Like, you know, I did all that all my life. Like he took John from me. Like I don't want nothing to do with God. So
Right.
they just didn't push it. They weren't like those religious folks that just want to push it down your throat. They give you enough to make you think. So I denied going to church. And then finally I got the house, same week, the house and the job, no furniture. We were just so happy to have a house that we slept on the floor the first night.
That's awesome.
That's how happy we were just to have our own again. So the next morning, you know, I get a knock on the door and it's the Jesus Center with a truck and all of them furnished our house. They furnished the whole house for me and the kids. So, they didn't ask for anything. They didn't ask if I needed anything. They just did it. And that's when I started seeing God in people again. So I started opening up a little bit more to the idea of going to church, the entertaining the idea. So I went to
Right.
church. And before I got to church, I had a lot of questions. I was like, where have you been, God? Like, why would you leave me? Why did you forsake me? Why did you take John? Why did you take my family? Why me? Like, why me?
Right.
And when I'm sitting there, the pastor starts speaking, and it's like everything that's coming out of his mouth is an answer to everything I was asking. Like, I didn't leave. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and I felt like he was talking to me. So
Isn't that
everything
how
went
wonderful
smooth.
God is? You're sitting in church thinking he's answering all your questions, and then someone over there is
He's
thinking the
just
same thing. And God can
Yep,
just be like a mental
exactly.
amoeba and answer all of our questions
hmm
with one sermon, you know?
So the kids actually joined the youth group there. And that's what got me to be more, with going to church. I didn't involve myself with the church like I did the last time,
Right.
but I was going to church every Sunday. Then this guy got out of prison. I had just gave birth to our daughter. So he was locked up from the moment I was pregnant, found out I was pregnant, till I gave birth to her. I actually went into labor visiting him in prison.
Oh, wow.
And almost didn't make it to the hospital, but that's another story. But so he gets out, and he's in there. He's much better when he comes out, looking for a job, doing what he needs to do, and then he's cheating on me the whole time. So a neighbor saw him with someone else, came back and told me. I just didn't feel the same after losing so much time with
Sure.
him.
Sure.
I was just like, I looked at myself in the mirror one day and I was like, I don't recognize myself. I don't know who I am anymore. I need to find myself. So I decided to come back to Baltimore. Um, he became abusive when I told him I wanted to leave. He was never physical because, I mean, we did get into physical fights, but he was never like that. He would break holes on the walls, scream, intimidate, you know?
Right.
Um, and he actually, the night that I told him I was leaving, um, and I went to the house just to get the little bit of stuff left to go home the next day, he pulled a knife out on me, and he put it up to me and said, "You're not going anywhere, because if you leave, I'm going to kill you, and then I'm going to kill myself." And normally that would have scared me or intimidated me, but I felt this strength, that I couldn't tell you back then where it came from, to fight back. And I looked at him. I put the knife right near my heart, and I said, "I wish you would." I said, "Because then I would be with John." I said, "So if you think I'm scared to die, I'm not afraid to die. So if you're going to kill me," I said, "you better do it really quick, because you see that door? I'm walking out and I'm going home. So if you're going to kill me, please don't do it behind my back. Do it now." And I just looked at his face, and he
He
was
saw.
shocked.
Hmm.
He was shocked. He was just like,
He saw your resolve.
"You're crazy?" And I'm like, "I'm leaving. We're done. This is over." So the next day I ended up jumping on a Greyhound with the kids, which, by the way, the Jesus Center that knew I was going through all this abuse and stuff, um, paid for, with the police department there. They had a program to reunite families with their families somewhere else. So they contacted my mother, and I ended up back in Baltimore. So I get there. Now I'm a single mother of 7
7.
kids. But I was always a single mother, because it's not like he helped me ever. He didn't do anything to help me. So now it's 7. It's 2 more to the mix. And I'm by myself now. My mom, I mean, I had her house. We slept in one bedroom. I had a bunk bed. Few kids slept up top. I slept at the bottom with the babies. Some slept on a mattress on the floor. We just slept in a one bedroom. Um, and I got a job at a grocery store, just to be able to support my kids.
Sure.
Um, so when I'm there, I run into a girl I grew up with, a lady I grew up with, and I ran into her at a grocery store, and she said, "Why don't you come to church?"
Boy,
And
that
I'm
Jesus
like,
guy is pretty persistent, isn't he?
Yeah, he really is. So I looked at her, I was like, I didn't want to brush her off because I really liked her. And honestly, I saw something in her because she was on drugs. She's the
Mm.
prostitute. And when I saw her, she wasn't that person anymore. She wasn't a drug addict. She wasn't selling her body. She was different. And there was something about her that I just couldn't be rude to her. So I exchanged numbers with her. I was like, sure, I'll let you know. She's like, if you don't have a ride, we can pick you up. You know, she was just doing everything. And I'm like, I
Yeah.
got you. I got you. Well, guess what? I didn't call her. I didn't want nothing to do with God again. Remember, here I am
Right.
again. Because you don't see your own faults in stuff. You want to
It's
blame
all
God,
God's
but you
fault.
don't.
Right.
It's all God's fault, but you don't want to take responsibility for your part in it. It's choices that I made that led to that. So, okay, here we are. I'm working at this grocery store and I just wanted more. So I decided to go back to school and finish what I started when John passed away. I was going to school to be a nurse, but when John passed away, I was a year away from becoming an RN. When John passed away, I tried to go back to school, but it was hard because the last place that I was at with John was the cafeteria. So it was really hard. So I left it for a while, but something inside of me just kept telling me like,
It's time to go
that's what I've
back.
always liked to do.
Yeah.
That's what I've always loved to do. You know what I mean? Is take care of people. So I ended up going back to school to finish what I started. Um, I actually ran into a friend of mine from back when we were younger kids. We grew up together and he had gone through some stuff in his life also. And we just ran into each other one night and we became inseparable, like best friends.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I went to school, did what I had to do. And before I was done school, they find you jobs there. So they do job placement. Um, they send my resume out to different people, you know, because that's how they find you a job. And Planned Parenthood is the first ones that called me. So Planned Parenthood, to me, I was like, wow, it's a big name. You know, I can get my foot in the door in there, provide women's health care. It's awesome. I've never heard anything about abortion with Planned Parenthood. I heard about like cancer screenings. I heard what everyone else hears. So I was like, I would love to be a part of a big name like that.
Were
That
you
does really
pro-life?
well
Were
for
you
women.
pro-choice? What were you at this point? What would you have labeled yourself?
Back then, I didn't believe in getting an abortion myself. So
Right.
for myself, no, I did not believe that. But I did not feel that I had the rights to tell another woman what to do with her body. How many
Right.
times do you hear that?
Right.
Her body. I never saw, you know, the baby as a different body. That's not how it was even
So
taught
you
to me
bought
when
the
I was
rhetoric.
growing up.
Yeah, I was curious where you were. So yeah.
Pro-life for me,
But
but
everybody
not,
else can do what they want to do, which
and
is
the
how they suck a
exceptions of
lot of
rape,
us in.
right? And also like exceptions of rape, you know, incest. That's what I bought into.
Yeah.
Um, So I went, you know, I had a phone interview with the guy that was in charge back then. They move a lot of they lose a lot of employees and get a bunch of other employees. So it was a man at the time that interviewed me on the phone, and then I went in for the face to face. I went in for a face to face, and that was the question I was asked: how do you feel about abortion? They told me they provide, you know, STD screenings, family planning. They never emphasized abortion to me.
Sure.
Um, they asked me if I was bilingual. I speak English and Spanish. I'm fluent. So I let them know that. I didn't think nothing of it back then. Um, and then she asked me what I thought about abortion. And I said, well, I mean, I wouldn't get one myself, but I don't feel it's my place to tell another woman what to do with her body. So that's her personal choice between her and her doctor,
Right.
right? So I got the job. That was a Friday. It was actually February, so we're in the month. I actually left Planned Parenthood February 8th of 2014.
Okay.
I started February 27th of 2013.
So you weren't
So
even there a year before you saw the truth of.
no, I couldn't do it anymore. So I started working that Monday. I was supposed to shadow for like a week. I was supposed to start in the counseling department first.
Right.
So they move you through the clinic. They do counseling, the ultrasound, you know, they tell you, they train you in these different areas, but never once told me, you know, what the abortion stuff entailed. So I started getting ready for that, all pumped up for that counseling training. because I felt that's where the most difference is, when you get to speak to the woman, find
Sure.
out what's going on, give her,
The
options.
humanity part.
Right. So here I am, ready for that. When I get kicked in the gut is what I call it, because when I got there, um, they had lost an employee. They were so short staffed that they threw me into a surgical procedure. So the first thing I ever did was attend a 6 weeker, um, dying to abortion, losing its life to abortion. So, I went in there, I shadowed. I didn't think anything of it because I didn't really see anything. I just heard a really loud machine, the suctioning. But again, 6 weeks, it was over pretty quickly. I did that for a week. I shadowed, never got anything higher at the time. When I first started that first week, I didn't get anything higher than maybe a 6 or 8 weeker. I don't know if that's how they do the people they start there first. I don't know what it is,
I
but
think
that was
you're
me.
right. I think they didn't want to start you with big ones because they just kind of want to numb
To
you and
ease me
just
in.
indoctrinate you. That's right. See, it's
Right.
nothing.
And then you're not seeing much of anything. So it's nothing. You're just doing the surgical procedure. You're taking the surgical trays out of the room to get cleaned, and all that stuff. So I didn't think anything of it. Um,
And
it
you still
wasn't
didn't get to
until,
counsel anybody. You're waiting for this day to
no,
counsel, right? Yeah.
no counseling. So I actually picked up the surgical procedure stuff pretty quick. It didn't take me a week to shadow anyone. After like the third day, I was already on my own. From there, I stayed in the
Can we
surgical
stop right there
procedure.
for a second? If
Mhm.
you're watching and you are thinking about this, there's someone who is only 3 days on the job and they're leaving them alone with you and your body. And that's kind of scary. I know you weren't technically performing the abortions, um, but 3 days. I just kind of wanted to let our. So keep going. I'm sorry.
And that's because I caught on pretty quick. I was easy to train.
Yeah.
Um, so I did that for a few weeks. And then our clinic traveled. So we did surgical procedures in Baltimore City. We traveled every Tuesday and every other Saturday to Annapolis. Now, that clinic was smaller, so it was more medical abortions, the pill, which everyone knows is the pill. Um, and we didn't offer sedation there, so that's why Baltimore City was more of the surgical. So we went to Annapolis, and that's when I got my first 13 weeker. And now I'm not in the surgical room. Now I'm training in the POC room, which is where you take the jars that are in that machine and
POC
you have
is
to
products of
product of
conception.
conception.
And Abby
Yeah,
Johnson said you guys would joke about it and call it
pieces
pieces
of
of
children.
children. Yeah.
Right. So that's where I was taught that you take the big jars that come from that machine and you put them in this, it's like a baking dish, and you run water through it, to get all the blood clots and everything out, and that's where you have to pick out the pieces of the babies. You have to put this baby back together to make sure that you got everything out of the woman's body. So here I am, mind you, I've never seen anything with a 6 weeker. Here I am with my first 13 weeker, and I'm picking out arms and legs and the head, and I'm putting this baby together, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, that's a baby. Like, if that's not tissue,
Right.
that's a baby. That's a real baby. Toes, fingers. I'm like, what? Like, I thought this was tissue. So that's what I was thinking. Like, that's a baby. And so that was my first 13 weeker that I had to piece together. And that's when I started getting messed up. Like, I'm just like, so right after that is when they threw me to counseling. So I finally went to counseling training after I pieced that 13 weeker together. Um, that bothered me because it looked just like a baby. And then I'm thinking to myself, why would someone want to do that to an actual baby? Like, what's going on with these women that
Yeah.
they feel that's the only way? So that's when I began counseling, which I was excited about. That's where I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to be from the beginning, because I'm like, yes, like I can find out what's going on, and use my own experiences as a single mom. Because if that's the case, I'm a single mom, I can't do it. I'm a single mom too. I got 7.
I got
My
7 and I'm
husband
I'm
died.
doing it. Yeah.
Right. So I shadowed a whole week. It wasn't I caught onto it in 3 days and I was good because I had to get with the program. So it was the way they were counseling. Um, they didn't care to dig deeper. There was a question that you would ask at the beginning of the session, which was, are you 100% sure of your decision today? And even if they hesitated, they're like, okay, well, you chose surgical. So you need to sign here and here and here. You know what I mean? Oh,
Yeah.
it's medical. And that's all. It
It's
wasn't, you
like
were
car
supposed to,
sales. Instead of
right,
saying, "Do you want to buy a car today?" You're like, "So which one
right.
do you want to buy
You want
today?"
sedation, no sedation. It's going to cost this much for sedation. This is how far along you are. So it's going to cost more. So it's just sales. She signs on the dotted line and from there she goes in the room and that's it. Or she gets sedation and she goes in the room. So it's like, I was just like, okay, where's the question? Like, what about if she hesitates? I noticed a lot of women would hesitate with that question and no one ever took the time to find out why. There was not a direct yes all the time. So I said, I'm going to play it the way they want me to play this. But when I'm by myself with these women, I'm doing things differently.
Different,
You know what I mean?
right?
But I had to do it the way they want it. And once they felt comfortable with the way I counseled, they left me by myself. And that's when I met a lot of women that would be hesitant. And that's when I would start asking, okay, you hesitated. Like, what's going on? Why do you feel you need this abortion? Have you thought about adoption? And I would ask questions and I was taking longer than the 5 minutes. So I started clashing with the clinical director. And I'm like, well, she hesitated. Like, isn't that what we're supposed to do? We're supposed to help women. What if it's something so simple? You know what I mean? And she's like, we're not here for that. We're here to perform abortions. And I'm like, well, isn't
It's
it
not
about
what your
helping
marketing
women?
says, right?
Right. I'm like, but I thought we were helping women. So I got in trouble for that. But I actually met a lady there, a Hispanic woman, just like me. That's when I realized why they asked if I was bilingual. Because a lot of our clients were either African American or Hispanic, just like me. So here's Hispanic women that don't speak English. And I really went with them, like, why? I had a woman that I asked her, like, what's wrong? She started crying. I was like, why are you crying? You don't want I don't think you're 100% sure. And she told me she had 5 kids and, she is a single mom. Her husband left her. She can't do this. And I'm like, honey, yes, you can. And I said, I'm a single mom too. My husband actually died. He had no choice. And she's like, what? And that's the lady that left with prenatal vitamins because I went out and I said, I need prenatal vitamins. She's decided to cancel her abortion. And it felt so good just to share
Aw.
with another woman that story and for her to do that. But then my clinical director was not happy with me. So they moved me from there. They moved me to ultrasound. They taught me how to do the ultrasound.
Because God
And
forbid you keep sending their clients away.
with prenatal vitamins. Yeah.
Yeah, because each abortion was costing about how much?
Oh
600?
my gosh. An abortion there could be like 250. I mean, I've seen them go up to 500.
Okay.
And that depends on sedation. So what it is they'll do the ultrasound and people think, they do these ultrasounds, the women sees the babies. No, they don't. That's not what
They
the
don't let them.
ultrasound of Planned Parenthood is for. The ultrasound is only to date the pregnancy. And
And
they
to
do
see
that
how
by
much they can
measuring the
charge you.
cranium.
Yeah.
Exactly. So they measure the cranium of the baby's head, the head. That's how we could tell how far along they are. So that tells them, what size cannula, which is a straw looking thing that goes inside the woman's cervix to, suction the baby out. And that's how much, we charge. If it's more than a 6-week, actually a 6-week, could be, let's say 250, a 14-weeker is going to cost a lot more. So, and if you want sedation, that's like $50 more. And, if you want this, so it's a lot of money in the abortion industry. So I learned how to do the ultrasounds, but my heart was always still in the counseling. Because I noticed that in the ultrasound, we weren't asking the women if they wanted to see their babies. And I'm thinking to myself, whenever I had an ultrasound, I always saw my baby. So why are we not asking them? They're just laying there and the machine is away from them.
Right.
So that happened. And then, then they move you to clean the trays if they want to clean the trays. Because if you want to know the truth, we did so many abortions. We did 50 a day there. We had 2 rooms, 50 abortions a day. So we're jumping from one room to the next, one room to the next, one room to the next. We had to just go here, there, here, there, here, there. It was just nonstop
Must have been
abortions.
exhausting.
That the trays would sit piled up whilst they were supposed to be getting washed and sterilized. And I've even seen them rewrap, you know what I mean? Just wash it real quick and not put it in the heating machine that sterilizes them, the autoclave. So, I mean, it would be so busy. We were just back and forth. Yes, I was really exhausted. I mean, you go in there, your shift is at 9. You're supposed to get off at 5. You're not leaving there till 8, 9 o'clock at night. I work in downtown, which is, you know, pretty crime-wise, it's not a good thing. I don't drive. I take a bus. So here I am taking a bus back and forth. It was a lot. It was a lot. But so, yeah, I just started seeing things that were unsanitary. I started taking pictures because I knew, like, I started feeling like if I ever leave this place, I'm turning them in. Like, it's just disgusting. Like, I took pictures of the trays just sitting there. I mean, I still, to this day, when Abby says the smell of abortion has a smell, it does. And it's a smell that you cannot, unless you worked in that industry, it's hard to explain it. There's no explanation for it. So unless you know what it's like, you don't know what it's like. But it does have a smell. And even to this day, that is something that I can still smell. That is a smell that's never gone away. And it's horrible. It's nauseating. And it's just like, it takes you back. And it's crazy. It just happens at random times. You're not even thinking about it in the smell. You know what I mean?
Oh, I do.
But there
It's
is a
like
smell.
memories of anything. You can see something, smell something, have a perfume, and think of your grandmother, and you know.
Yeah, and it's something that just doesn't go away. So that's how I started there. It was more because I bought into, you know, the
The
lie
rhetoric.
that
Yeah.
it's about women's health care. You know, we do cancer screenings, we do STIs, we do family planning, and
Did
I
you
mean,
ever
they
see any of
do
that?
have.
Did you ever see anyone get family planning? Did you ever see?
So they did have family planning. They had a section for it, but out of the 50 abortions a day, maybe 1 or 2 a week would be family planning, and it wasn't even for maybe for like a pill or an STD. Honestly, they started doing vasectomies there where I was at, in the office in the family planning. The doctor that was doing abortion started doing vasectomies there. So the only time you saw a male go in there was when we were taking his sperm and putting it under a microscope to make sure that the vasectomy had worked.
Wow.
So yeah, they started doing vasectomy there.
You would think that they wouldn't do that because that'll kill some of their clientele, you know? It's like, oh, we want you to
But that was
procreate.
rare. It wasn't a lot.
Yeah.
But that's the only time I saw someone go in there, was when I actually looked up. And that's another thing. I'm not qualified to look at sperm cells and, oh, if they're dead and not moving around, then the procedure worked. That's what the doctor told me. I'm like, okay, well, they're not moving, so I guess they're dead. You know, you don't know stuff like that. I'm not qualified for any of that.
Right.
That should have been her job. They started teaching us to do IVs. So we learned to do IVs on each other so that we could push the drugs. Again, I'm not qualified to do that.
Now, you
know,
weren't an RN yet?
No,
Okay.
as a medical assistant, I can do IVs, but I'm not supposed to push narcotic drugs.
Okay.
That's not something that I should be doing as a medical
Right.
assistant. That is something that a qualified nurse should be doing. But it wasn't. Any of us could do it. So that happened to me. And then another thing they started pushing, which was very personal for me, was Essure. So Essure is birth control. These coils, they put them inside your tubes, and then your tubes scar over. So it's a new tubal kind of ligation, but it's with
Yeah.
your tubes scar over. It blocks your tubes. You no longer get pregnant. It's supposed to be permanent. So the reason that started conflicting with me and the medical director is because she was pushing this on women. And I was a woman that had Essure. I was talked into getting Essure by my GYN in California after I had my daughter. And I had nothing but issues with it.
Right.
Like, I got this rash all over my body. They didn't tell me it had nickel. My insides, I mean, I was having so many problems with Essure that you could find a doctor to put them in, but they won't take them out. They would tell you you're crazy. It's not Essure, blah, blah,
It's
blah.
got to be
Well,
something else.
it's something else, right? Your hair falling out, this. I started having like thyroid, a bunch of issues, but it's all in our heads. So I signed into this Essure problems on Facebook and found out that more women were experiencing what I was experiencing. So I actually had to come up with the money, $7,500 to fly to Georgia. Abby helped me with that. This is when I had met Abby, to get them removed out of my body. And it was migrating. It had punctured a hole in my uterus. So it was moving. And as soon as I got them removed, everything was, my skin cleared up. Like I'm not feeling like the pain that I was feeling in my pelvic area. And Bayer was getting sued from women with the Essure because women were getting pregnant with these things and the coils would be stuck on a baby, or they were migrating to another part of your body. So I'm actually one of the people that just won a lawsuit against Bayer. I was in that lawsuit. They settled, of course, because, and they actually took the product off the market, which is what I wanted. I wanted them to take it off. But at Planned Parenthood, they started pushing it. And when I got Essure put in, I was in an OR room. I was put to sleep. It was like a surgery, okay? At Planned Parenthood, we had 10 to 15 minutes of training. So they would bring somebody in, they put the Essures in, and that's it. 15 minutes of training for these providers. Not qualified, again, to do these procedures. I'm glad that Bayer took them off the market, but you know how many women were probably implanted with the stuff at Planned Parenthood? So that's another thing that I was like, no, I can't. How am I supposed to talk a woman into getting something that I'm against? Oh, because it doesn't work for you doesn't mean it's not going to work for her. No, I don't want to hear that.
But you were getting
There's so many
smarter
women.
this whole time because you were seeing a layer upon
I
layer
was
of
starting to see
lies.
things. Yep. So then, but I still went to work every day. And that's the thing. People say,
Because it
you
was good
saw all
pay,
this.
right?
Yeah. And I had a family to support. I still had children to support. I didn't qualify for cash assistance and welfare because of my husband passing away. We had a little bit of Social Security. So with Social Security, I made $10 more than what welfare would give me. So they denied me. So I have this little bit of Social Security and I have to work. Because, you have to pay rent, you have to pay bills, you have to pay food. So I still went to work. And that's the question everybody asks. Well, if you saw all this stuff and it was bothering you, how could you stay there? How could you just keep going to work
Who's going to
every day?
feed my children? Right.
Exactly. Who's going to feed my kids? No one has us like I have us. So, I went to work every day, just telling myself I'm doing this for my kids. At this point, it wasn't about women anymore to me, because obviously that was a lie.
Right.
It was just about my children. I have to feed my kids. I have to do it. I have to get us out of that one bedroom and get us into a place, which I did.
Do you mind me
So
asking
quitting,
what they pay people? What is the pay for someone who's doing the things you kind of do?
I was a surgical assistant. When I started, it was like 15. And then,
Dollars an
you can make up
hour?
to,
Okay.
you make up to 18 an hour. It just depends. The more you train, the more money you can make.
Yeah.
Because you're training in different departments. You know what I mean? And I was a good worker. I mean, I went to work every day. I did what I had to do.
Good work ethic.
So it wasn't until what did it for me, it was just building up and building up. But what really did it for me was when a young woman came in for an abortion. It was at our Annapolis clinic, and the ultrasound was performed. I heard my coworker gasp in there. I ran in the room and I looked at the screen and I saw 4 babies on the screen.
And
I
this was
saw
not in
4
vitro
babies.
fertilization. These were
No, this is
naturally
natural
occurring.
conception. Natural conception, which is rare. And I didn't know how rare until, recently. Honestly, it's like 1 in 729,000
Right.
pregnancies.
I looked it up after I saw your thing too, which is
It's
practically
so,
1 in a million.
yeah, it's rare. Without IVF, that's very rare. So I was excited, and I yelled it out, oh my God, 4 babies. And then I just caught myself like, I just did that in the room with the mom. The mom that was there for 1 abortion, now hears me blurt out 4 babies and jumps up from the table and looks at the screen. And she instantly started crying. She was so upset and she was crying. And then, she was dating 13 weeks. They were each 13 weeks. So not only were there 4 babies in there, but they were identical quadruplets, which is even more rare. You know what I mean? And she jumped up and she was looking at that screen and she decides to call her boyfriend. And that's when I realized that it's not that she wanted this abortion. He didn't want children. He was forcing her into this abortion because he didn't want any children at all. He didn't care if it was 1. He didn't care about the 4. He just didn't want any. So I was the counselor that day. I did not sign off on that. First of all, she needed sedation. Annapolis did not offer that.
Right.
We had to reschedule her for Baltimore City. So the next day she came into Baltimore City, which we had to move quick with her because she was already dating 13 weeks.
Right.
We had a week. We went up to 14
weeks. A week
weeks.
before it becomes illegal in that state.
Yes.
Right.
Yep. We went up to 14 weeks there at that Planned Parenthood. So a week is all we had. So, we're moving, or I should say Planned Parenthood is moving. They scheduled her for the next day. She came in the next day. Again, she's upset. I'm trying to counsel her, and I couldn't sign off on that abortion. I wouldn't do it because she was still upset. And I saw what happened the day before, and I just had that feeling she was being coerced and forced into a decision that, she didn't want to make. So I didn't sign off on that. She left again. She was rescheduled again for the next day. The next day she came in.
Did she do
it's
that?
the front desk. The front desk will just reschedule you. Now, whether
So
she
they
went
don't
out
even
there
let
and did
you
that-
leave if you're saying you're leaving. Like, let's get you in for another one.
Yep, let's get you rescheduled. You're too upset. And this was the clinical director. So the clinical director there was also one of the abortionists. And I actually looked her up. She's the only one out of all of us that's still there. And she's actually like the COO or something. She's up the ladder with Planned Parenthood now. She's still there, but she's higher up. So she's been, she moved up the chain, like they say. So she was rescheduled. The next day she comes in and her boyfriend is with her. And he's being really nasty, really mean to the staff. Like, I guess he figured, she's still pregnant. Like, why is she still pregnant? So I didn't go in the room with them. My clinical director did. What was discussed in there, I couldn't tell you. What they did in there, I couldn't tell you. I have no idea. All I know is she didn't get an abortion that day. She left crying again, and that was that. I didn't see her being rescheduled for the next day. I didn't see her on the schedule at all. She just left with him. Now, the next day while we're cleaning up, she comes in as we're closing and she's holding herself and she is bleeding and she's crying. He apparently had took her somewhere else, another clinic that had started the procedure. We usually give misoprostol. That's the pill, when you're under 90.
To induce the abortions, right.
Right. Well, I've never seen it being given to a 13-weeker. I've never seen it there. I'm not saying they don't do it. But that's apparently what they had given her at this other clinic. And
so they took her to
like,
a second clinic. They gave her the pill, though they shouldn't have because the baby's too big. Plus, there's 4 babies.
Mm-hmm.
She starts bleeding. She comes to your clinic.
She comes to us for help. So we take her in the bathroom. We undo her pants and her, her bottoms, and a baby fell inside the toilet. That baby was deceased. He fell right in that toilet. We took him out of there, and as we're grabbing her and putting a Chuck's pad under her, 2 more fall out of her. Those 2 were holding on to each other. It's like they were still hanging, but they were holding on to each other. So I'm sitting here thinking, like, how does this happen? Like, you know what I mean? So I take the babies into the POC room, and I have 2 of them in a little surgical bowl, the ones that are holding each other. And here's this one in the Chuck's pad that I start holding, and I just started crying with my coworker. Like, this is a baby. Like, these are babies. This is not cells. This is a whole baby. And they were boys. So it's like they have their parts. There's no way they could have been 13 weeks. They looked much older. And one thing about Planned Parenthood also is if they want to do that abortion, they can finagle that machine to make it look like it's 14 weeks. 13 weeks, we've done it. We've put it for 12 weeks when they're really like 14, you know what I mean? Just to do that abortion.
Right.
So they can change it. And I looked at these babies and they were big babies and they had their parts. I could tell they were all boys. Now the last one had to be suctioned out. They took her in the procedure room. They suctioned that baby out. The jar came to me. I had to rinse that baby and pick his pieces out. And I'm still in the PLC room. Like, I did not leave that PLC room. I'm in there with my coworker and I'm just like, these are babies. Like, what are we doing? Like, what have I done? And I'm thinking to myself and just looking at my coworker and I'm like, I cannot do this anymore. And that's the first time I said that. I said, I cannot do this anymore. Those are babies. And I just started praying, something I hadn't done, mind you, in
Since
years.
before John died,
Anger.
right?
Something I hadn't done in years. And I just started praying for these babies and praying for myself. Like, I'm so sorry. Like, what am I doing? Like I knew it was wrong. You know what I mean? That's when I had that, like, and I'm just like, God, please, I'm so sorry. Like, and that was it for me. When she was done and everything was over, someone came to pick her up because her boyfriend that dropped her off left her there. So someone else came to
With
get
babies
her.
falling out of her body.
He
Makes me
just
so
dumped her
angry.
there. And then when we were putting her in the car, I made sure that I went out with her. Because another thing that people don't know unless you work in that industry is that every woman has the same look on her face. No matter if she went in there decisive on that abortion or she was hesitant, after that abortion, they all have the same blank stare. It's like an empty stare, like there's something missing. It's like an emptiness, and you can see it in their eyes. Like, it's almost like I can look in their eyes and I can feel the emptiness in their soul. It's so hard to describe how I could feel that with these
I can
women.
see what you're saying though. I can feel what you're feeling.
And I'm just like, and that's what I remember of her. She hugged me and I looked at her and she just had that lost, blank, lone, like something was ripped out of her soul. It's not even out of her body, but her soul. And I could feel her pain. And that's the last time I saw her. And after that, you would think I would quit, right? I'm running out of there. I'm out of here. Nope. I still had kids to support. So I went to work the next day. And they told us we weren't allowed to speak of it. We weren't allowed to talk to each other about it. Like it never happened. And I'm like, how do they expect us to do that when we were all affected by it? I mean, we were all crying for these kids. How do they want us to do that? So we would still sneak and talk about it. But then they brought us a grief counselor. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, they're bringing a grief counselor for us. You know what I mean? That's awesome, right? They want to make sure their employees are okay. Well, the grief counselor they brought in was someone I trusted. She actually was my counselor when I was in that abusive relationship. She's the one that helped me get away from all that.
Right.
When I lived in Baltimore. Yeah. She's the one that helped me. She's the grief counselor. Look, she's a social worker from the hospital where I gave birth to my children. She was my social worker.
Right. So you already
The
had a
lady I
relationship with
trusted.
her.
So I'm looking at her and I'm like, yes, it's her. Like, I trust her. She's good. Yes, you know. But what came out of her mouth changed the way I saw her forever.
What did
She just looked at us and said, so at what point in time, at what point in the pregnancy is it too much for an abortion? At which point is that thing a baby? Like, it's just the question she was asking. I'm like, what are you talking about? I was like, it's always a baby. It's a baby from the beginning. So I'm like, me and her clashing, and I'm thinking to myself, oh no, this woman doesn't care how we feel. This woman just
She was there
wants
to
to,
take the temperature of you guys, wasn't she?
yeah, she was
To
just
kind
trying
of
to make
see
sure
who's
that
going to
we were with the
agree.
program, that we were still with the program about abortion. And then that's when I found out that my manager there, my supervisor, she was in tears And she's like, well, how about a 20 weeks? I'm like, 20 weeks, that's a baby. That's definitely a baby. No, I don't agree with 20 weeks. And they're like, well, what do you agree with? I was like, honestly, I don't even agree with 6 weeks anymore. Like, it's just not right. And she said, well, what if somebody's fiance gets murdered and they're 20 weeks pregnant and they already have a son and can't take care of another one? I was like, what? What are you talking about? My husband died and I had 5, you know what I mean? So it didn't make sense to me. But after that meeting, that was it for me. I was like, they don't care about us. They don't care about these women. That's what they want. They want abortions. They make $50. I'm sorry, they do 50 abortions a day. You got to think the cheapest is 250. I mean, times 50, just 250. Plus you add sedation, then you add the weeks, then you like, I'm thinking to myself, and I actually saw how much these doctors were getting paid because at the end of the week, even at the end of the day, they summed it all up. And I'm like, it's a lot of money. So I was like, I can't
That's
do this
blood
anymore.
money. Yeah.
That's blood
They're going to
money.
have to
And
answer to
I'm getting
God for
paid
that.
that. So you got to think they're not just getting paid that blood money. I am too. That money of those children's bloods was in my paycheck. The money that I was using to feed my children and keep a roof over their head wasn't the blood of those babies. And I just couldn't live with myself no more with that. So I had decided then and there that I had enough. But I didn't know what I was going to do because, again, I still needed a job.
Were you living with your
Um,
mom at this point, or did you have
nope,
you
I
had
had
your own
finally had
apartment?
my own place. So working there, I got to be in my own house. We had our own again. So here we are steady in our house for almost a year. And here I am thinking about quitting a job and I don't have a backup. So how do you do that? That's what kept stopping me. And then what happened was I was coming to work and there's always prayer warriors outside. There's the
Yes.
nice, peaceful ones, and then there was really nasty ones. I mean, I had one call me a murderer. I was
Yeah.
gonna burn in
What do they
hell.
think they're going to get, right? Oh, you know what? You're so convincing. Let me go because you
Let me
just
go
told me I'm
quit.
going to hell. So thanks.
Right. God hates you. And he got in my face with a camera, and I looked at him, and I remember snapping at him one day. I was like, you're pathetic. I was like, you're sitting here, you know,
Trying
telling
to
me
pretend
God,
you're a Christian.
right, God hates me and I'm gonna burn in hell. I said, you probably go home and beat your wife. That's what I told him. I was like, get out of my face. So I was really nasty to him too. But then I realized, like, wait a minute, there's two sets. There's two separate people. Like these people over here with rosaries, they had a sign that said 40 days for life. And then who are these people? They make them look like they're all bad, but they're
They're
not the
not.
same. So I started noticing they weren't the same people. So there was this lady on the sidewalk. I always saw her praying there. She had these really pretty rosaries. So I walked up to her and I said, can I have one of your rosaries? And she looked at me and she said, do you know how to pray to the rosary? I said, yeah. I was like, I was born and raised a Catholic. Um, I just been angry at God for a long time, but doesn't mean I forgot, what the rosary is and how to pray to it. And it doesn't mean that. I have to feed my kids. I said, and I just started pouring everything out to her. I felt so comfortable with her. It's
Oh.
almost like this lady on the sidewalk, like I felt a connection to her, like a pull. Like she's the only one I could go to and trust it. And so I told her my story and she said, God still loves you. He's just waiting for you to come back. And then she just started praying with me every morning. And then the day that I decided to leave, she had given me a flyer that said, and then there were none on it. So
Which
I
is
had put
Abby
the
Johnson's
flyer.
organization. For those of you that don't know, Abby Johnson is the former director of a Planned Parenthood. She is the one of whom they made the movie Unplanned. Talked about how she went from pro-abortion, the director of the Planned Parenthood, to a pro-life advocate. And so she has since started the organization called And Then There Were None, which is seeking to say if there's no workers in an abortion clinic, well, then you can't have abortions. So that is what Myra is talking about when she said she saw a brochure that says, and then there were none. So go right ahead.
So I took it home and I just put it to the side, didn't think about it again. She had told me that, when I get the chance, contact Abby Johnson. She said, look her story up. It's so similar to yours. She was just giving me a little bit of background
Right.
on her. And I'm like, yeah, right. Who would be in charge of a Planned Parenthood and then decide they're going to leave? They're all corrupted. You
Abby.
know what I mean?
Right.
So it's
Soothsayer.
like, I don't know, like people up higher, like they're the most corrupted. So I was like, okay, so I didn't think nothing of it. I just threw it to the side. But then I said to myself, like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I don't know how I'm gonna do it. And that's when I started having a relationship with God. I called my friend from the supermarket and I went to the church. And as soon as I walked in there, like I felt like I belonged there. Like it was like a welcome home feeling. Like
Yes. I
it
know
was
that
crazy. It's hard to
feeling.
describe, but I felt like that's where I needed to be. And then I just started going there. And she was excited, of course, because she wanted to share what God did with her life, and I've seen what He did. So looking at her, I
Is
was
this
like,
the girl that used to be the prostitute that was talking to you?
and the drug addict.
Okay.
Hmm.
And so, Myra, when this day that you walked into church and felt like you were supposed to be there, how many days or weeks after that quadruplet abortion was this? Days?
I
Weeks?
left. I left a couple weeks after that
Okay.
abortion. Um, so I was just praying a lot to God in church, and I was like, look, I don't know what I'm gonna do for money. I don't know if I'm gonna get a job right away. I said, but I'm gonna give this to you, and I'm gonna trust that you know what you're doing. I said, because I can't do this anymore. And I am sorry. The first experience at that altar was an emotional one. I fell at the feet, like they say, the foot of the cross, and I just
Yes.
laid it all there. And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I know you must know what's going to happen, because I wouldn't be feeling this if it wasn't, because of you. So, but I have to go back tomorrow because I have to see, the lady's name is Mary.
The
I said, I have
one
to see
who,
Mary,
which lady's name was Mary?
my
The,
prayer warrior.
okay, got it.
So I said, I have to see Miss Mary. So when I went in the next day, remember my friend that I ran into that we became inseparable?
Mm-hmm.
Well, now we were together.
Oh, the
So I
man.
told him, yeah, my husband
Yes.
now, Frank. So I was like, I have to go see Mary. I have to go see her. I have to tell her I'm not going back. Like, and he was happy because he told me from the beginning, like, are you sure you want to work there? Like,
Are
I
you
don't know if you're,
dating him at this point, or were you guys married at this point?
I'm dating him now.
No,
So,
okay, so now you're dating him. You're not yet
uh,
married.
no, not yet. So we're dating, and I'm just like, oh, I'm gonna quit. I'm gonna quit. He knew I was gonna quit all along. He tried to talk me out of it as my friend. He's like, I don't
Talked you
know
out
if
of
you want to do
quitting?
that, out of working there.
Oh, okay.
He was just like, are you sure? Like, I don't know, Myra. They do abortions there. I don't know if you're gonna want to do that. Are you sure you're gonna be able to do that? And I'm like, I have to. I have to support the kids. And he is like, I don't know. He knew me, so it's like, I don't know. So anyway,
So
he
he's
drove me there.
pro-life. He's dating a woman who's got 7 children. I mean, he is stepping into a huge life change. What an
Yep.
amazing man. You should talk just about how awesome he is on another show, but keep going.
Well, I told him anyway when he first was interested in me. I said, "Look, I come with a big package. Like their dad died, this is going on. Anyone that gets with me has to accept them because I
Right.
come with them." And he looked at me and said, "I want to be with them." He's like, "I love you and them." So, of course, like so that's yeah, like you said, another story. But he took me to the Planned Parenthood and I saw Mary. I pulled over to the side and she looked at me and I was like, I need you to pray for me. That's the first thing I said to her. And she looked at me, she's like, always. And I was like, no, I really need you to pray today a little harder to the man upstairs. I was like, because I
That's why I
said,
quit.
I'm leaving today. Today I quit and I'm not coming back. So I might not see you again. I said, but I wanted to say thank you because I couldn't leave without telling her thank you and without letting her know that her work out there on that sidewalk, sometimes they're out there and they're praying and they don't see
The
results,
fruit
right?
of their actions, right?
Because they don't see what's going on behind the scenes, because a lot of us probably don't walk back up to them and say, hey, I'm the fruit of your labor, but I wanted her to know that. Like, I wanted her to know that she helped me find God again, and that she is the reason that, like, I'm back at church, and she's the reason that I fell in love with God again, and she's the reason that, you know what I mean? She's just the reason. She's the person he used. She was my angel on earth, is what I called her. And
And
I
she
wanted
knows
her to
this
know that.
now. She knows all
Yeah.
this. Yeah.
And I wanted her to know that because I didn't want her to feel like ever giving up on that sidewalk at all. Like, if she got me out of there, she can get anyone else out of there. So
Yes.
she gave me another rosary because Frank wanted one to put on the car. And then I told her, I don't know what I'm going to do for money. So you need to pray to him up there. I need a job, tell him, hey, I need a job. And she prayed for me. I left and I go home and I'm cleaning and I find and then there were none
Right.
flyer. So I decided to stalk Abby for a minute, got on the internet, started reading her story. And when I read her story, I was like, oh my gosh, like
It is
she knows
very similar to your
exactly how
story.
I feel. I said, she knows exactly how I feel. So I put in my information online. And like 5 minutes later, it couldn't have even been 5 minutes, I get a phone call and it's Nicola, which is my case manager through And Then There Were None. And I told her my story. She said, I have to call you back. She got off the phone. Well, like last year, I was doing a speech, I was doing a speaking engagement, and she said, I have something to tell you. So remember when I got off the phone with you, when we had our first encounter, I was like, yeah. She's like, I had to get off the phone. She said she got off the phone and called Abby. I was her first case ever with And Then There Were None.
Oh.
She calls Abby and says, you didn't tell me anything about quadruplets. She's like, quadruplets? And she was crying. And Abby's like, yeah, it can happen. I mean, I probably was their first story with that. She's like, oh no, I don't know. So she gets back on the phone. I mean, we cried. We've been through a lot together, Nicola and I. Like, she's she's more like a sister to me
Because
now. I
she was
mean,
a former Planned Parenthood worker as well. Because everybody at
no,
she
she
wasn't. I
wasn't.
thought everybody at And Then There Were None was.
No, just Kelly. I think it's Kelly and a few others, but Nicola, no. Nicola is just an amazing person. She's pro-life. She's an amazing woman, period. Like, she loves God so much. Like, you can see when people love God, but you can feel it with her. It's not like
Yes.
you can just see it. Like, with her presence alone, um, just her alone, you can feel God when you're around her.
That's how
And
I
that's
want to
why
be. I want to be someone you can
whenever,
feel Jesus.
yeah, and whenever like I go through stuff, even now, like, my son have been through stuff, because the enemy, one thing I do want to clarify too is that, like, no matter how far we go with God and how much we choose to keep following him, the enemy will attack. And the enemy attacks so much harder when you go in for God, a lot harder. So the harder you go for God, the harder the enemy tries. And he will use your family. He will use anything and
Yeah, he
anyone.
will.
And I'm proof of that. Nicola can attest to that. So my kids, my 26-year-old, he's 26 now, but a few years ago, he ended up being rushed to the hospital. I had just moved to Florida and my son was being rushed to the hospital. And I called her. He was actually accused of things at work that are not him at all or in his character.
Your
Um,
26-year-old?
yes. And you know who he called first? He calls me and I said, it's the enemy. It's because God has something for you on the other end, and
Yes.
he's trying to distract you from getting it. So you need to get off this phone with me and you need to pray. And, so now every time something happens with one of them, all they'll say is, I'm going to be okay because I've got God. And it's nice to hear my 26-year-old or any of them say that. Like, I'm
Yes.
not worried about anything because God's got me. So, you know, and he went through that. I called Nicola and, they have their prayer warrior team over there with Abby and them, and they prayed over him. They prayed at the church that I attend. And I mean, we just prayed for protection and everything over my kids because it's always my kids. They get attacked. And come to find out, it was false, obviously. Um, the person that accused him of stuff supposedly had proof, couldn't produce it because there was none. So he ended up on top of all that. But it's hurtful, because they don't understand why the world is so ugly sometimes. And I tell them, it's because I'm speaking now. So now I speak, right? I'm a speaker. So ever since I started speaking, my kids get attacked. And I'm like, it's going to happen. You just got to learn to fight your battles on your knees.
Yes.
So, I mean, it's one thing to attack me. I don't care. But the enemy gets crafty with my children and I have to really fight him. So, but Nicola's been one of my biggest prayer warriors. And by warrior, I mean a warrior. She will go to battle with me and with the devil, with God on
That's
our side.
amazing.
And she does. She does it every time. The
Can
last
I
thing that happened,
go
Mhm.
ahead? Go ahead.
The last thing that happened was my 12-year-old had gotten rushed to the hospital. I was due to speak. Um, and no, it was the gala. It was Abby's gala in Texas. And, she had this big first time, to celebrate the
Right.
the
And then there were
workers. And we
none.
had this, yeah, got our hair done, our headshots and everything. She went all out for us. Um, And the day that I was supposed to fly out, my son, my 12-year-old, comes in the room with chest pain. So I had to rush him to the hospital because his EKG showed a right bundle branch block and a bunch of other stuff going on with his heart. This kid's never had heart issues. Okay. But I'm due to fly out that day. So that happened. I called Nicola. I was like, I don't think I'm going to be able to come because Frankie's in the hospital. They're doing all these tests and I don't know. I can't just leave my 12-year-old. So she starts praying. I said, just tell them, cancel my flight. Like, I'm not gonna be able to come. And then I'm sitting there and my son comes up to me. He's sitting there, he's laying on the bed and he says, "You're not going?" And I'm like, "Nobody, like, I'm not gonna go. Like, you're not feeling well. I have to be here with you." You know what he said to me? He said, "Mom, I'm gonna be okay. God's got me." And I said,
Oh.
"What?" And he said, "I've been talking to God this whole time. I'm gonna be okay." And he's like, "But you need to go." And I'm like, "You want me to go, but you're not feeling well." He's like, "Because God's got me." He's like, "You have to go. You have to go to that." So I called Nicola and I was like, "Look, he's going to be okay." You know what I mean? He just told me God's got him. So I'm trusting that he's going to watch over him while I'm gone. And I said, for the enemy to try this hard this morning to stop me from going there is because there's a blessing there for me. There's something happening,
Or
and I don't
some
know what it is.
baby's life is going to get saved or
Yep.
something.
So I
Yeah.
said, so I'm going. I said, "You didn't tell him like to cancel yet?" She's like, "No, I didn't because I had a feeling not to." But she prayed for him, and then the doctor came in and said that everything checked out. He was doing better. I had to follow up with cardiology, but there was no life-threatening stuff. So I knew my oldest daughter would watch over them. My kids live right next door to me, the house next door, the older kids.
Yeah.
So I knew they would be okay with them and with my husband. And so I went. And the blessing, sure enough, I ended up getting paired up with this girl, this young girl in my room. And, the question I always had working in the abortion industry was, how do you remember the blank stare,
Mm-hmm.
the lost look, the emptiness? I always wondered what happens to these women after because we don't follow up.
Right.
And those are questions that I always have for God. Like, I just want to know if they're okay. Like, what is it? What is that empty? Like, what are they feeling? Like, I need to know that because if not, I won't have peace. Well, I met this roommate, which is another girl, a new girlfriend, and then went on a new quitter. Um, and she's pregnant, but she was telling me her horrific story with the first two kids' father and how she got pregnant and she got coerced into an abortion. And she said that she worked at Planned Parenthood and they just talked her into it. They didn't listen to anything she had to say. It was more like, no, no, you can't do this. So she did it. And she said the reason she left there is because after she had that abortion, she said she just felt so empty, like something was ripped out of her. And she said that she had no say so. She felt like she just, like the whole world was against her, including her employer. And the fact that they didn't follow up to say, "Hey, how are you?"
How
They
you
wanted her to come
feeling?
back to work right away. So I got the other side. You know, I
You
got
got the
to
answer to your
finally
prayer.
speak to someone that's been through an abortion and how she feels about it afterwards. So it's crazy because we both ministered to each other. She ministered to me and healed that part of me that felt lost for so long. And I ended up helping her with her current situation with my story. So
Oh,
it's like that was the
God
blessing I was
uses
waiting
that.
for.
For the sake of time, let me just kind of fast forward and say, so that was February of what year?
2014.
2014. And here we are 8 years later. Did you ever get to a place where you felt healed? And from the time of when you left until you felt healed, what did you feel like you needed to do? Did you feel like you need to cleanse yourself or was take us there, but just kind of keep it short for the sake of time.
Um, Leaving there in order to cleanse myself, like I said, I started going to the church.
Yeah.
I started dedicating myself to the discipleship there. took the classes, dedicated my life to God, and I got saved. So I actually got rebaptized.
Mhm.
And I did that to cleanse myself, to, let the old die and the new be reborn. So I actually did get saved.
Did you feel healed though? Has there come a day where you're like, that's past me. I'll keep talking about it, but I'm healed from that. It can no longer hold me captive.
So that day came at the gala with that young lady in my room. That's when I finally felt like this weight had been lifted off my chest and my shoulders, and I took a deep breath and I felt like, okay, I got this, because she told me keep speaking, like keep doing what you're doing,
Keep
and
doing what you're doing.
mhm,
Give us
and
the
that's when
fairy
I was
tale
like,
ending. So you ended up marrying Frank, right?
I did. Yeah,
And
we've been married 8 years.
any more kids?
No, we actually we had two miscarriages.
Sorry.
So no babies, but it's
He's got seven. You have a baby named Frankie and a husband named Frank. Even
my dad's name was Frank.
like see, it was meant to be. It's his junior. Let
Yeah,
me
my
ask
my
you
dad's
this.
name.
You've told us so much, and I could keep talking to you forever because I know that God has used your voice and He's continuing to use you to save souls, save babies, save moms. Um, what, um, name one thing you would have our viewers do differently as a result of something they heard today?
Just really listen. Open up your ears, because once you open up your ears to listen to the rest of us, your eyes will be opened. I mean, if you are a prayer warrior that's out there praying, um, just know that sometimes you get like somebody that's combative, because we're told not to speak to you.
Right.
Just be patient. If you're out there praying, be patient with the worker. Just love on them. You know, that's all you can do.
That's some good
Just
news.
keep an open mind.
One more, it's not a question, it's a fill in the blank. Okay?
Uh-huh.
Say, and this is it. When I die, I will know my life has been a success if.
If I've saved just one soul.
That is fantastic. I think you've already done that. You know, Myra, you have been a blessing to me and to the however many thousands of people are watching and will watch. And I just, I'm going to ask anybody who's watching this to pray for Myra, pray for the other women like Myra and men who want to help people. I've heard this story again and again. They want to counsel, they want to help women, they want what's good, and they get sucked into the diabolical Satan's grip, and they don't know how to be rescued. Pray for them. Pray to give them wisdom and courage. Pray that a Mary comes into their lives that can lovingly guide them, escort them to the healing that we see here with our beautiful Myra Neyer. If people want to find you, Myra, to contact you for speaking or for any information, how can I get a hold of you? You have a website?
So I do have a Myra Neyer pro-life speaker on Facebook,
Hmm.
and Ambassador Speakers Bureau. If you go on to ambassadorspeakersbureau.com, you'll find me there. Or you can just Google my name and I pop up with my old speaking engagements and even how to book.
That sounds good. And if you have questions, you can just email me here or post on this video. Just posting a comment on the video isn't going to be easy, but you can contact me at breakfastwithbacon.com and say, I'm trying to get a hold of Myra and I wasn't able to, and I can connect the two of you. So we have to go off the air. I do want to say, please go and like my Breakfast with Bacon page on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Rumble. And I've been putting this out there all over, is that please start subscribing to not just my newsletter and my page, but if there are speakers out there that you like and you appreciate their shows, you aren't going to be seeing it on these social media outlets too much. There's great censorship. They are shutting us down if we put out a message that the powers that be in the technocracy don't like. So the only way you're going to get them is if you go directly to their websites, and you aren't going to know if you're missing shows. So I'm sorry that I have to end the show with a plea like that, but I would greatly appreciate it if you subscribe to breakfastwithbacon.com again. But on happy notes, I'm so grateful to have had today's guest, Myra Neyer. Myra, I forgot to tell you how I end my shows. So here's the code. When I point to you, say sunny side up. Okay? All right? So I'm so grateful each and every one of you was watching this show. I am Dr. Christine Bacon. You've been watching Breakfast with Bacon, and I'd like to remind you always to live your life
Sunny side up.